two girls rode their scooters to the store to buy some snacks. But this simple trip took a dark turn, and the details are truly shocking. Over the years, there were many unexpected twists in this story, some almost unbelievable, and the ending was quite surprising. Michaela Garecht was born on January 24, 1979, in Oakland, California. She was the first long-awaited child her parents had been hoping for, after 5 years of trying. Later, Michaela's parents had two more children, and they all moved to a quieter town called Hayward. It was a peaceful place for their growing family. Michaela was a typical, cheerful child who enjoyed playing with her siblings and spending time with her best friend, Katrina. These girls practically lived across from each other, so they were constantly visiting and playing near their homes. On November 19, 1988, when Michaela was 9 years old, she and Katrina were running back and forth between their houses, trying on different outfits for a school performance. It was a joyful day, as it marked the start of Thanksgiving break. Around 10 in the morning, Katrina's dad gave her $5 to buy some candy. The excited girls rushed to Michaela's house to ask her mom if they could go to the nearby store, which was less than a mile away. Michaela's mom had doubts about letting them go because both girls were only 9 years old and they had never been to the store alone before. Although they had been there many times, it was always with family or older neighbor girls. After some arguing, Michaela's mom agreed with the condition that they would buy candy and head straight home. She was particularly concerned about Michaela's safety, since she was their long-awaited first child, a true miracle to her parents. That day, Michaela's mom believed that nothing bad would happen. The store was just a short distance away, and the girls planned to ride their scooters there. Michaela ran back to Katrina's house. They intended to use two identical scooters, so Katrina took hers and borrowed another one from her brother. They went to the store, left their scooters nearby, and went inside to make their purchases. When they came out, they got caught up in conversation and completely forgot about their scooters. They started walking home, but quickly realized their mistake and went back to where they had left the scooters. That's when they noticed that Michaela's scooter was missing. Thinking that someone had moved it, the girls decided to go around the store from different sides to find it. Michaela walked along the parking lot and soon spotted her scooter next to a car parked a few yards away from the store. She headed toward it, but suddenly, Katrina heard a terrifying scream. She ran back and saw a man grabbing Michaela and forcing her inside the car, right next to her scooter. The man swiftly returned to the driver's seat and sped away. Shocked, Katrina rushed back into the store and alerted the cashier about what had just occurred. The cashier immediately called the police, who arrived at the scene within minutes. The store employee also called Michaela's father, as they were acquainted, and informed him of the situation. Michaela's father, accompanied by Katrina's father, rushed to the store where investigators were already present. The man told his wife to stay at home by the phone in case the police called. The detectives faced several challenges immediately. There were no surveillance cameras near the store, and the only witness to the abduction was Katrina, who was in deep shock and could barely speak. Her father was allowed to take her home. The store cashier provided the first lead. She mentioned that a suspicious man had been loitering around the store shortly before the abduction. He had parked his car, got out, but never entered the store. Instead, he walked along the building, peering through windows and seemingly watching the girls. The cashier had a gut feeling that he might be planning to rob her. According to her description, the man was white, around 30 years old, and had a prominent mustache. He had arrived in an old maroon-colored sedan, but the model and license plate number were unclear. After gathering description of the kidnapper, the police created a composite sketch and shared it with the media. News of the abduction quickly spread throughout the city and even beyond, leaving people shocked that such a brazen act could occur right near a busy part of town. They also disseminated the sketch and a description of the suspect's car to hundreds of patrol officers across the county. Officers began pulling over any vehicles matching the description in the hopes of finding the girl alive. Meanwhile, the detectives handed over Michaela's scooter to forensic experts for examination. They believed that the kidnapper had seen Michaela and Katrina arriving at the store and deliberately moved one of the scooters near the back door of his car to facilitate the abduction. This led them to think that his fingerprints might be on the scooter, and indeed, they found a fingerprint that didn't belong to anyone in Katrina's family or the 9-year-old girl. However, there was a challenge. The fingerprint was partial, making it difficult to conduct a database search. In those days, The technology wasn't advanced enough for such procedures, so the police had to rely on direct comparisons with potential suspects. By the evening of the abduction day, the FBI had joined the case, as there had been a rise in child disappearances not only in Hayward, but also in nearby cities. They suspected a possible connection between Michaela's case and these other disappearances. Despite the involvement of the FBI and extensive media coverage, there was little progress in locating the missing girl. Michaela's parents were understandably devastated. Her mother blamed herself for what had happened and recalled an unsettling incident that occurred just a week before the abduction. Michaela had woken up unusually early one morning, sat at the kitchen table, and claimed she was writing a poem. This was odd because she wasn't known for waking up so early. She mentioned that she had been awakened by a noise in the attic and was inspired to write a poem about people being abducted and kept in attics, not killed. At the time, her mother found it strange for a 9-year-old to express such ideas. But after the abduction, it took on an eerie and almost mystical significance. She couldn't help but wonder if Michaela had unknowingly predicted her own fate. In the 2 days following the abduction, the police put in exhaustive efforts to search for the suspect and the missing girl. However, they faced numerous challenges, and despite their best efforts, they were no closer to finding Michaela. They decided to revisit Katrina, hoping she might provide more information now that some time had passed. Here, the investigators encountered a perplexing turn of events. The girl who had witnessed the abduction and the cashier provided entirely different descriptions of the kidnapper's appearance. According to her account, the man appeared to be around 20 years old, with long, unkempt, light-colored hair that reached his shoulders and a face covered in pimples. She also noted his blue eyes, which reminded her of a fox's eyes. Katrina also recollected some details about the car. It was a beige sedan with a boxy shape and numerous dents. The police quickly realized that the cashier had given them a description of a completely different person. Her suspicion had arisen from the suspicious behavior of a man near the store. But Katrina, who had genuinely seen the abductor, described an entirely different man and vehicle. This presented a significant challenge for the investigators. They had disseminated an inaccurate composite sketch of the suspect through the media and to patrol officers, leading everyone to search for an entirely different individual. All of this unfolded within the crucial first 48 hours following the abduction, the most critical period for a swift resolution. Based on the girl's description, they promptly created a new composite sketch and redistributed it. Additionally, the police decided to interview all men in the area with prior convictions for sexual offenses. Numerous volunteers also joined the efforts, going door to door to interview residents, in the hopes of someone recognizing the abductor or providing any other relevant information. They posted thousands of flyers featuring the girl's photo and a description of the incident. In just the initial few days, a staggering 42,000 of these flyers were distributed. After several days, they received their first intriguing lead. 3 individuals contacted them, reporting a hiking trip in a vast national park near their city. During their excursion, experienced hikers came across footprints on the ground, noticing one set belonging to an adult and the other to a child. They decided to follow these tracks, eventually stumbling upon a blanket and empty fast food wrappers in the heart of the forest. The police considered the possibility that these tracks might be connected to Michaela and her abductor. The psychological profile developed by FBI experts also suggested that the abductor would likely take his victim to a location as far removed from civilization as possible. Given the park's size and its proximity to the city, it seemed to align perfectly with this theory. Detectives decided to search the park, utilizing all available resources. They combed the ground while helicopters with thermal imaging scanned the area from the air. However, all their efforts yielded no results. They couldn't find the girl or any evidence. The police continued to search other parks, mountains, and remote locations, but all led to dead ends. In parallel, they received a staggering number of tips. Because the case received extensive media coverage nationwide, within the first month of the investigation alone, they received around 4,000 tips. Investigators struggled to follow up on each one, which proved to be highly challenging. This case was widely discussed among the residents of neighboring San Francisco and nearby cities. Even well-known figures made appeals to the public, urging people to share any information with the police. Soon, a substantial reward of $70,000 was offered. and Michaela's photograph appeared on millions of milk boxes throughout the state. Despite such widespread community involvement and an abundance of leads, detectives couldn't make any progress. By the end of December, a month and a half into the search, the police conceded that the only progress made was checking thousands of leads. Since then, there was no progress for many months. Police continued to receive numerous tips and diligently investigated each one. Even Michaela's mother conducted her own investigation, studying similar cases and trying to figure out who might have abducted her daughter. They all held on to hope that the girl was still alive and the perpetrator was somewhere keeping her captive. In 1991, detectives turned their attention to a 43-year-old man named Timothy Binder, and the more they delved into his background, the more unsettling it became. Binder had already come under police scrutiny prior to Michaela's abduction due to his peculiar behavior. He had been sending gifts, letters, and money to numerous young girls. Some of these letters contained Bible passages, with phrases like, "I have chosen you," and "be with me" highlighted. Concerned parents of some of these girls reported him to the police, leading to an interrogation of Binder. He claimed he was merely trying to befriend these girls, thinking they were lonely. However, the investigation revealed a troubling history. In 1985, Binder had been fired from his job in Child Protective Services in Colorado for collecting personal information about young girls. Later, he sent gifts, money, and letters to them. During a search of his van, authorities discovered many photographs of children and Bible passages adorning the interior. Additionally, Binder had a prior arrest for attempting to lure 2 girls into his van, although no charges had been filed. What's more weird, Binder frequently visited the graves of young girls in local cemeteries, spending an unusual amount of time there. However, the situation took an even darker turn. 6 months before Michaela's abduction, a 7-year-old girl named Amber disappeared in the vicinity. Shortly thereafter, Binder reached out to the girl's mother, offering assistance and regularly visiting her home. He even wrote a letter to the police, suggesting that the next missing girl would be 9 years old. Several months later, Michaela, also 9 years old, was abducted. After her disappearance, Binder made numerous calls to her mother, visited her home, and offered his help. But the unsettling pattern didn't end there. In early December 1988, Binder sent a Christmas card to an FBI profiler he had previously spoken to. The card featured an illustration of a girl holding up 4 fingers. Shortly afterward, a 4-year-old girl went missing in the same town. Despite these disturbing circumstances, which constituted circumstantial evidence, detectives obtained a search warrant for Binder's home, where he lived with his wife. Unfortunately, they couldn't find any concrete leads linking him to any of the abductions. When news about Binder's odd behavior reached the newspapers, people began to suspect he might be a serial killer. This led to harassment and attacks on him and his family, and he eventually sued the city authorities for spreading misinformation, winning the case. Detectives continued to investigate him for several months, but ultimately concluded that there was no concrete evidence tying him to these crimes. Some detectives believed that he posed no threat to children, and his peculiar behavior might not have been connected to these cases. Consequently, the police redirected their focus towards other potential suspects. A new substantial lead didn't emerge until December 1992, 4 years after Michaela's disappearance. An inmate from Indiana serving time for robbery contacted the police claiming to know the identity of the girl's abductor. He stated that he had helped bury her body in the same park where traces had been discovered. Initially, investigators showed little interest in this tip, but the inmate wrote a letter to a prominent San Francisco newspaper. When his story became public, the police faced harsh criticism, and under public pressure, they decided to interview the inmate. He promised not only to pinpoint Michaela's burial site, but also to lead them directly to the murderer. He was transferred to California, and alongside the police, he embarked on a search mission. According to him, the body had been buried in a gladiolus field, and officers focused all their efforts on that area. The search continued for 8 hours until the inmate suddenly admitted that he simply made up the story. He explained that he had wanted to provide some comfort to Michaela's family and help them move forward. Instead, Michaela's relatives and the police were furious. For this false statement, the inmate was sentenced to an additional 6.5 years in prison, nearly doubling his overall sentence. Moreover, he was ordered to pay Michaela's family compensation of $6,000. In August 2000, a new suspect emerged in the case. police arrested a man named Curtis Anderson, suspecting him of a murder that happened a year earlier in Vallejo, involving a 7-year-old girl. He confessed to the crime and went to prison, but detectives had suspicions that he might have been responsible for other similar crimes. For 7 years, there was no concrete evidence to support this theory until Curtis contacted the FBI. He was in poor health and wanted to confess to additional crimes before his death. According to his confession, he had killed 13 more girls and women, including the 7-year-old Amber, who had disappeared 6 months before Michaela. He provided specific details that made investigators consider his involvement seriously. However, proving his guilt remained challenging because there was no physical evidence, and they couldn't locate the victims' bodies. Talking about Michaela's case, Curtis denied any involvement, despite the similarity of his car to Katrina's description. FBI agents planned to continue questioning him, but Curtis passed away. In 2012, another potential suspect came forward. An inmate contacted the police, claiming that his associate, Lauren Herzog, bore a striking resemblance to the composite sketch of the Michaela case suspect. Detectives were intrigued because Lauren and his partner had been convicted of murders they committed together. They were suspected of killing 19 people, but investigators could only prove some of those crimes. A month before his associate approached the police, Lauren had taken his own life in prison. Nonetheless, the police decided to investigate his potential involvement. A photo of Lauren in his younger days did resemble the composite sketch, but detectives needed more evidence. They chose to excavate a well where Lauren and his partner had disposed of their victims' bodies. They found thousands of bone fragments, which were then examined by medical experts. After extensive analysis, it was determined that the bones belonged to 5 different girls, but none of them matched Michaela's DNA. Despite examining several wells, the police couldn't find any evidence linking Lauren to the case. In 2018, there was a significant development in the case. A man named David Mitch was charged with the murders of 2 women in 1986 near Michaela's town. The key breakthrough here was modern DNA analysis. Back then, they couldn't analyze the biological material found under the victim's nails. But with advancements in technology, they linked David to these crimes. David was already in prison for killing his 39-year-old girlfriend in 1989. Detectives decided to investigate his possible involvement in Michaela's case and found some intriguing connections. They discovered that David was in the same area when Michaela was abducted. He also matched Katrina's description and had a similar car. Since David's fingerprints were already on record, experts reevaluated the partial fingerprint found on Michaela's scooter. Thanks to modern technology, they made a significant breakthrough. The fingerprint on the scooter was a perfect match to David's. In 2020, David was charged with Michaela's murder, as the hope of her being alive had faded. He denied his involvement, and the case went to trial. In early 2023, preliminary hearings took place, and the judge ruled that there was enough evidence to proceed with the trial. David's lawyer attempted to challenge the evidence, arguing that the scooter's fingerprint didn't necessarily link his client to the murder. However, in this specific situation, it seemed a dubious claim as it was evident that the abductor deliberately left the scooter next to his car's back door to seize the girl when she approached. The defense also tried to challenge the murder charges since Michaela's body was never found, suggesting no proof of her death. However, this argument was not valid in modern times, as numerous cases have resulted in convictions without the recovery of the victims' bodies, given the substantial evidence. Moreover, David had a history of violent crimes throughout his life. At 16, he broke into a house and assaulted a woman at knife point. After serving a year in prison, he was released early and soon attempted another assault on a different woman. After another 2 years in prison, he was released again. In May 1988, 7 months before Michaela's abduction, David was arrested for a store robbery. He was sentenced to a year in prison, but was released a month before Michaela's disappearance. Michaela's father traveled from another state to attend the press conference announcing the arrest of his daughter's kidnapper. Unfortunately, Michaela's mother, who had hoped to find her daughter alive all those years, couldn't attend as she was battling cancer. Shortly after the news of the arrest, she passed away, thanking investigators for uncovering the truth before her life's end. Police pledged to continue searching for Michaela's remains and offered a $10,000 reward for any valuable information. David Mitch's trial is set to begin soon and will involve 3 cases: Michaela's and the 2 cases where his DNA was found under the victim's nails. Initially, the prosecution sought the death penalty, but the district attorney changed, and the new one made the decision not to pursue it. If David is found guilty of all 3 murders, he won't receive a life sentence, only several decades in prison. This decision caused outrage among the victims' families and sparked media attention, with David's lawyer being the only supporter of this change. However, David is already 62 years old, and there's not much chance he'll live to see the end of even this reduced sentence. It's worth noting that the correctional system, which repeatedly released him early from prison despite his history of crimes, unwittingly allowed him to commit Michaela's murder. Had he not been released just a month before the incident, the girl might still be alive today. Alright guys, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed my video, please share your thoughts on this story, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Your support means a lot to me. Thank you.